Hey everybody, welcome back. And today I'm talking to you about the form and the structure of that great work, The Great Gatsby. If you need a little bit more understanding of the way that the text is structured, and of course the genre that sits behind the work itself, this is the video for you. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So when we talk about form and structure, what we're looking at is the way that the story is built, okay? The way it's put together. If you think about the way that a house is built, okay, so, the form, the type of thing would be a house, okay? The structure is all the foundations and everything that puts it together. There's your kind of base, there is the walls, there is your roof, okay? Then within there, you have your staircase leading up to the next floor and your rooms, etc., and your little bathroom, that kind of thing. That's the structure. I guess we're not going to speak about language in this video, but the language would then be the decoration, the things that go within the house, okay? So structure is about the organization, how it's built, not just what happens. So it includes things like narration, so who's narrating the story, the timeline, the kind of order of events, the chapters and the way that chapters kind of build tension or release it, motifs, so kind of repeated symbols or ideas, and then framing devices. So the way that the story arrives to you as the reader. So the first thing to consider is that the novel is a piece of modernist fiction, written in 1925, I guess kind of considered early modernism. Modernist writers were challenging traditional storytelling, right? So we're looking, I guess, more at kind of fragmented narratives, using symbolism, ambiguity, fragmented perspectives. We're looking here, I guess, at a sense of confusion. That's not accidental. You have to think that the modernist writing that is most famous emerged from the First World War, a brutal and bloody conflict that really reconfigured people's perspectives of humanity and of the world. Fitzgerald ultimately uses these elements to show confusion and loss of meaning and this emptiness behind the glitter of the 1920s, because granted, people were celebrating their newfound life and freedom in a post-war world, but that didn't necessarily mean that they were addressing the true issues that existed beneath it. So Nick is our first-person narrator. I guess one of the most important structural choices, right, that Fitzgerald made. Nick narrates the story. He claims to be honest, but in fact his narration is subjective and selective, okay? So even within his narration there is confusion. How can you be both honest but also subjective? Because you're always going to be overlaying your opinions on top. This means that we never see Gatsby or Daisy directly, right? It's always filtered, and that is a word that you would be using a lot in your exams, in your writing. It's filtered through Nick's interpretation. Nick, not Mick. Okay? So, Nick is our first person narrator. But the next thing to consider about Nick is that he is unreliable. He's subtly unreliable. Okay? It's not obvious. You have to pull that out. He withholds information. He defends Gatsby. He judges others while pretending not to. Gives a bit of partial truth, partial bit of memory. This unreliable narration is intentional. It creates mystery around Gatsby, but also mystery around the story. It begs the question, and you should be asking this of yourselves, can you trust Nick? Okay, can you trust what he is saying? The novel is presented in a non-linear, so if this is linear from A to B, The Great Gatsby is a little bit more, I guess, squiggly in some respects. We have flashbacks. It's not told in a straight line. Gatsby's past is revealed through these flashbacks. There's a little bit of gossip in there as well, which adds to this sense of hearsay. And we know, with gossip, we should treat it with a pinch of salt. But ultimately what this structure does is it builds suspense and reinforces one of the novel's themes, which is that the past constantly intrudes on the present. The past constantly intrudes on the present. So if you're trying as a society to move into the future, you're always in some ways being pulled back into the past. There is a kind of chronology within the novel. So most of the story takes place over a single summer, okay, this summer of 1922. But Fitzgerald kind of very frequently pulls us backwards. So we go to Gatsby and Daisy's past in 1917 in the midst of World War I. We even go to Gatsby's childhood. The final chapter jumps forward, showing Nick's reflections months later. We also, I guess, realize that this entire novel is told from this late perspective. It's not so much said in the novel, but it's also worth thinking, like, as you move further and further away from events, how reliable is your memory, right? How reliable are the things that you experience if you're writing them down 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years later? And this kind of structure here, it mirrors Gatsby's obsession with the past. Nick becomes obsessed with the past too, even though he's simultaneously critical of it. Now, in terms of our chapter structure, the novel has a very controlled structure of chapters. Gatsby doesn't even speak until chapter 3. Okay, that's when we first hear him speak. Okay, so everything is building up towards this big reveal of this man. It adds to his kind of mythical qualities, okay, that he's kind of referred to but never seen. Midway through the novel, we see this reunion with Daisy that is very unsuccessful. Okay, that kind of pivots the tone of the novel. We have this dramatic climax in the Plaza Hotel confrontation, which ultimately ends up leading to Myrtle's death, Gatsby's death, and by extension to George Wilson's death. And then right at the end of the novel, as I mentioned, we have Nick kind of reflecting on these experiences. Now, in terms of our structural techniques, we've got lots of foreshadowing. That's also made possible by the narrative perspective because Nick is writing in reflection. That means he can kind of foreshadow events within there. But the foreshadowing, it kind of hints at tragic events early on. You have the appearances of the car, which hint towards some kind of terrible event. You have the violence towards women, obviously hinting towards the eventual death of Myrtle. Throughout the novel, you have this contrast and parallels, like the contrast between, for example, Gatsby and Wilson, both self-made men, but in very different realms. And the story kind of ends where it began, with Nick reflecting on the dream that Gatsby failed to reach. Now, everything in English literature must come back to meaning. Remember, method, in this case structure, shapes meaning. So the structure isn't just for style, okay? By slowly revealing Gatsby's past, Fitzgerald highlights the differences between illusion and reality. Right? Nick's narration creates this ambiguity and forces readers to question what is true. What is truth? Is there such a thing as an objective truth? Is that even possible to obtain? So that's the form and structure of The Great Gatsby. Okay, Fitzgerald just didn't just tell a story. He chose to build it in a very deliberate way. Right, the narration, the symbolism, the timeline all work together to reinforce the novel's ideas about dreams, illusion, and the past. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please like, please share, and do subscribe to this channel. And of course, you can head over to myheadspace.co.uk to find my resources. All of this information presented to you in 3 neat and tidy ways: short form video content, long form video content like the one that you just watched, and of course, study notes to aid you in all of your revision. So head over to my resources now and have a great day.